My mom said, "We're only inviting you out of pity, so don't stay long." I just smiled, took a sip of my drink, and quietly left. 2 weeks later, they found out I'd sold the family cabin they all counted on for summer vacations. Then the bank statements started arriving. Their joint accounts were closed, the property taxes were unpaid, and a lawyer's letter was on its way. "We're only inviting you out of pity, so don't stay too long." The words hit me as I set down my glass. The echo of my mother's voice, sharp and casual, cutting through the hum of clinking glasses and polite laughter. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her, that perhaps the music and the dull roar of conversation had twisted her words, but then my sister's laugh rang out, a quick, sharp sound like a judge's gavel coming down, and I knew I'd heard right. My mother leaned in close, her perfectly manicured hand resting on the back of my sister's chair, her diamond bracelet catching the light from the chandelier. She was already turning back to the group, dismissing me as casually as if she'd just swatted away an annoying fly. I felt my brother's wife's eyes on me, that smug, sideways look she always gave me, as if sizing me up and finding me lacking. My brother, his arm slung possessively over her shoulder, grinned and took another sip of his expensive scotch, his watch flashing in the dim light. They were all in on it, every one of them. I just smiled and took a slow, deliberate sip of my whiskey, letting the warmth spread down my throat. I didn't bother to answer. What was the point? I had heard those little digs all my life, felt the condescension simmering beneath their perfectly curated small talk. It used to bother me back when I thought I could earn their respect, or at least their acceptance, but that ship had sailed a long time ago. I set my glass down on the polished mahogany bar and glanced around the room. The house was just as I remembered it, all tasteful furniture and carefully chosen artwork, every nook and cranny a reflection of my parents' carefully cultivated image. It had once felt like home, but now it felt like a museum I had wandered into by mistake. I left without a word, slipping out the side door into the cold night air, my footsteps echoing off the stone path that led to the driveway. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket, probably another group text from my sister or a last-minute reminder about a cousin's birthday. I ignored it and slid into my car, gripping the cold leather of the steering wheel. As I drove away, the bitterness of my mother's words settled into a slow, simmering anger, but there was something else underneath, a kind of clarity. They thought I was the black sheep, the family failure. Fine, I'd play that role if they wanted me to, but on my terms. I was tired of being the butt of their jokes, the afterthought at every family gathering, the one they could dismiss with a sneer and a tight, condescending smile. By the time I pulled into the driveway of my apartment, a plan had already begun to form in the back of my mind, something slow and meticulous, the kind of long game that would unravel their perfectly planned lives one thread at a time. The next morning, I called Dan, my attorney. It was early, but he owed me a favor. We closed a tricky real estate deal a few years back, and I knew he'd be up for the kind of quiet, ruthless work I had in mind. When he answered, his voice groggy and slightly annoyed, I just smiled. "Hey, Dan, remember that family dacha my parents put in my name years ago? I think it's time to make some changes." I didn't waste any time. The morning after the party, I woke up with a headache, but it wasn't from the whiskey. It was the echo of my mother's words, the smug laughter of my siblings, the tight, condescending smiles they threw my way, as if they had me all figured out. Pity, that's how they felt about me, like I was some family charity case they were dragging around to make themselves feel better. I got out of bed, splashed some cold water on my face, and sat down at my kitchen table. Its small, scratched surface covered with a mixture of yesterday's junk mail and an old coffee ring I'd never bothered to wipe off. I grabbed a notebook and a pen, the same one I used to scribble notes on freelance projects, and started making a list. Not a rant, no childish revenge fantasy, I was past that. This was a plan, cold, calculated, and long overdue. The first item I wrote down in big, sharp letters: sell the dacha. I had almost forgotten about it. The family dacha, a cozy 2-story cabin on a lake about 2 hours outside of town, left to me by my grandparents. It had been a special place when I was a kid, full of summer memories, fishing trips with my grandfather, campfires that crackled late into the night, the sweet, smoky taste of charred marshmallows. But my parents had quietly taken control of it years ago, treating it like their personal summer retreat, a place for family barbecues and long weekends with friends. While I was rarely even invited, they used it without a second thought, just as they used me as the punchline to their family jokes. But the title was in my name, a fact I had mostly ignored out of a misplaced sense of family loyalty. I found my lawyer Dan's number and hit call. He answered on the third ring, his voice rough and groggy, as if I'd pulled him out of a deep sleep. "Tom, what's going on? It's not even 8 o'clock a.m. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the gray light filtering through my thin apartment blinds. "I want to sell the dacha, the one my grandparents left me." There was a pause and I could practically hear him frowning on the other end. "The family place, the one out on Lake Marlowe? I thought your parents used it." I felt a small, bitter smile creep across my face. "They are, but the title is in my name, and I'm done letting them treat it like their personal vacation spot. I want it sold quickly." Dan hesitated, probably weighing whether to push back. He knew my family, had been to some of our gatherings back when I was still trying to keep up appearances. He understood the dynamics, the subtle jabs, the power plays. "All right," he said finally, his tone changing to something more professional, more focused. "I can make it happen. We need to do this quietly if you don't want them to get wind of it before it's too late." "That's the plan," I replied, already pulling open the old metal filing cabinet next to my desk. I dug through the folders, flipping through old tax returns and utility bills until I found what I was looking for. the original deed, the yellowed, slightly crumpled paper still carrying the faint, comforting smell of cedar from my grandparents' old chest. I spent the rest of the morning scanning documents, double-checking paperwork, and signing everything Dan sent my way. I wanted this done before my family had a chance to blink. I imagined them pulling up to the dacha in midsummer with their SUVs full of coolers and lawn chairs, only to find a new family on the porch, waving politely as they unloaded their own belongings. In the afternoon, Dan texted me, "Got everything. I'll list it tomorrow. Sure you're ready for the fallout?" I grinned, staring at the words on my cracked phone screen. Ready for the fallout? They had no idea what I was planning. I put the phone down, leaned back in my creaking chair, and let the satisfaction of this first step wash over me. This wasn't just about the money, although that would be a nice bonus. This was about shaking the foundation of their perfectly polished world, making them realize they couldn't keep writing me off like some family joke. I picked up my pen and scribbled the next item on my list, the one that would really send a shockwave through their tightly woven lives. Joint accounts. This was only the beginning. Selling the dacha was the first crack, but I wanted to make sure the whole structure came crashing down. I had spent too many years as the quiet, overlooked outsider, the one they barely tolerated out of a twisted sense of familial obligation.